Hello everybody and welcome back. Welcome to part 2 of the OpenCV object tracking tutorial. Today we're going to focus on tracking multiple objects simultaneously. They could be different colors, such as these fruits here. I've decided that fruits comes in all different shapes and sizes and colors, so I'm going to use apples, bananas, and cherries as an example. Let's get started. Now, if we want to track multiple different objects, we're going to have to do two things. First, we're going to have to classify the objects as to what it is, and then we're going to have to group all the similar objects together and display them all in the same group of the same object. And we're going to start out by talking about how we're going to classify the objects. Now, in our C++ code, the most obvious answer here is that we're going to use an object-oriented approach where we create objects and define them with their own unique properties, and then we'll look for objects in the field with the same features, and we'll group them together. Now, in the comments of the last tutorial, a lot of people were asking how we can go about tracking multiple objects. Well, I'm going to go over that in detail in this tutorial. Now, in C++, what we can do is we can pack all the similar objects into a vector. And then later in the code, when we want to display them, we can just unpack the vector and display them at their respective coordinates. Alright, let's take a look at this visually. So we have our group of fruits here, our apples, bananas, and cherries. If we can filter out the object that we're interested in, let's say the apples at this point. We know how to do that. We learned that in the last tutorial. We're just going to filter within a threshold of colors. Well, after we filter them, we're actually going to create 5 separate objects for each apple found, and then once we create those objects, we can pack them back into a vector, and we end up with a vector of apples. Now, the same thing goes for the cherries and bananas. We search for them separately. We actually do it in sequential order, whatever order you want. We'll just go apples, cherries, bananas. But each group will be found within its own separate iteration within the code. Now, once you want to fetch the objects back, all you have to do is unpack the vector, and then you can use their values, each of the objects, to either display a graphic in their position, or use their positions for, I don't know, maybe a game that you're making. But enough banana cherry talk. Let's begin this lesson by downloading the first file you see below. Okay, so once you've downloaded your file, we're going to open up Visual Studio. We're going to create a new project. We'll call it Multiple Object Tracking. Click OK. Make sure you go Next, select Empty Project, click Finish. Alright, so first things first is we're going to head to the Property Manager. We're going to link our OpenCV libraries. So if you can't find the Property Manager, go up to View, and you can go down to Property Manager. Open this up, right-click on Debug, and Add Existing Property Sheet. If you followed the tutorial on installing OpenCV, you would have made one of these with me, and we named it OpenCV Debug 243. Or the most current version right now, I think, is 246. So whichever one you've installed. Alright, navigate to the Solution Explorer and right-click on Source Files. We're going to add in the source file that we just downloaded. I saved mine to the desktop, but we shouldn't save it there. We should actually save it in the directory of the project that we just created in Visual Studio. So I'm actually just going to, I see it here, so I'm just going to cut and paste it into my default project directory, and I'm sure yours is too, is in Documents, Visual Studio 2010, Projects, and then the name of the project, and then one more directory in, and we'll just paste it into here so that it's nice and organized. Click Add. Open it up. Alright, so basically this code is where we left off kind of in the last tutorial. I had to go through it and change a few things such that we can work through it and manipulate it so that we can track multiple objects. We're also going to be adding a class, a fruit class, to our code. We're going to go over some object-oriented programming, and you're gonna kind of learn the ins and outs of how most developers actually program. Once you learn how to do object-oriented programming, you're going to be able to program in other languages like Java that's what you use for Android programming. As soon as you can do Java, you're able to create mobile applications. So it's really important that you kind of get the concept of object-oriented programming, and this tutorial, I hope, will kind of teach you kind of the basics of that. Alright, so if we press F5 and build the program, you can see it's very familiar, just like what we had last time. I'm going to track this blue hat here just to give you an example. Alright, so we got the hat tracking. Put it on. Got my head. Hey. Cool. Alright, so you can play around with that for a little bit, get used to it again, the whole filtering concept. We're going to start out by scrolling down here, down to the track filtered object function. So our first goal is going to be, instead of using these two integers x and y, which kind of just generic x and y integers, we're actually going to be replacing that with a fruit, and we'll say fruit apple. We haven't made the class fruit yet, but when it comes to the point, when you scroll down here, we got x equals this and that. We're actually going to be going something like apple.setX and put in the x value, apple.setY, so that we're setting our apple object to have the values of x and y. Alright, so delete what we just wrote here. That's not going to compile. Delete this. We're going to start out by making the fruit class. So if you click on multiple object tracking up here, you can go down to add, and we're going to add a class. It's going to be a C++ class. And for our class name, we'll call it fruit. And what it's going to do, it's going to create a header file and a CPP file. And if you're not familiar with object-oriented programming or creating classes, don't worry about it right now. We'll get to all the points as we go along. Okay, so we have our fruit header file and fruit source file. That means we can start making our fruit class. So underneath class fruit, we're going to make our private variables. Now, we can start out by getting the basics down. Like, we know that we're going to have two integers for the x position and the y position. And since it's just just fruit, how are we going to decipher between the fruits? So I'm going to say we're going to call it a string type. Since string is underlined red here, we're just going to have to include string. Oops, string. It is still underlined red. So the reason it is because we could use the standard scope and type in string type, and see that's not underlined red, but that gets kind of cumbersome. So we can use using namespace std for standard, and you see the red goes away. Alright, so Control S and save our class, and we're going to go back to the multiple object tracking source file. And remember, before we made the class, I was saying that our goal was to get rid of this int xy, and we're going to just type in fruit apple. Alright, so the fruit's got underlined red, so that's a telltale sign that we need to include our fruit header file. So just type, as soon as you type in the quote mark, it'll start to give you some suggestions. Fruit.h. Alright. Alright, so going through this, we've made our apple. We've done some calculations in here. We learned that in the last tutorial, but now you see we're going to have to replace this x and y. So if we go apple.x position equals what we have here, we can see that we get an underline here. And the reason is because it's a private variable, and we need to access it. We need to have a public function that's going to access the private variable. And I know a lot of people, as soon as they start doing this type of programming, they're like, why? Why would you do that? Well, it's really, if you have a large program with a lot of code, the reason you do private variables is so that you can localize it to this one class. So that, like, what if I have the name xpos of a completely different class, like a completely different object, like a tennis ball or something. Okay, so we can't, like I said, we don't want to have to make a new variable name for every single variable. We can reuse the same names for our different classes, just as long as we keep them private. So head back to the fruit.h, and we're going to add in a public function. It has to be public, and it's going to return an integer. So we'll say int get x position, close brackets, and this is where we define the function. Once again, if you've never done this before, just bear with me. We're going to have to go to the fruit.cpp file and type in fruit and 2 colon signs here, and click on get xpos, close brackets, and this is where we're actually going to do the function. And since it's just, whoops, okay, so that's underlined, it's returning an integer, so we're gonna have to type in int fruit get xpos. Okay, that's good. So what this function is going to do, all it's going to do, since it's within the fruit class, it's able to access all the variables. So we can just return fruit. Let's check it out. Xpos. So that's fine. Okay, so with our xpos integer, we not only want to get it, we also we'd like to set it. So we have to add in another one. This one's going to be a void function because it doesn't need to return anything. We'll say void set xpos. And since we're going to want to pass in a number to set it to, so we'll just type in int x. Alright, so head back to the .cpp file, and we're going to do the same thing, except this one's going to be void. So void fruit set xpos, and it's going to have an int x as the argument. Close the brackets. Now this function, all it's going to do is it's going to take in the value that we pass it, and it's going to set xpos to the x. So all we have to do is just say fruit xpos equals x. We could also just say xpos equals x. I just like to keep it clean like that. Alright, so we're gonna have to do the same thing for y. So easy as that, we just copy and paste, change x to y, head back to the CPP file, do the same thing. Okay, make sure that's alright. Okay, so we have everything we need to, I know it seems like a lot just to manipulate two variables, but you'll find out later that it really does come in handy to have a well-structured class. So now that we have our two getters and our two setters for our x and y integers, we can actually go here and we can say apple dot set xpos, open bracket, and our apple dot set ypos. Okay, so once your code looks like this, we're going to scroll down a little bit farther. We're going to continue to eliminate our x and y here. We can see that we also have an underlined x and y, and so our goal is to just add in apple instead of x and y. So if we want to go to this draw object function, and we see it right here. So instead of passing in an int x and y, let's type in the fruit. And we see we're getting some more red lines underneath where the x and the y are, and that's because we no longer have x and y, we have the fruit being passed in. So we've made our getters for that, so we can now put in get x position and get y position for the x and the y. Alright, so I'm going to teach you another trick here. Hit Control H, and what that's going to do, it's going to bring up the find and replace. So what we're going to want to find is want to find x, and what we're going to want to replace it with is the fruit.getXPos. So paste that into here. Put your cursor right here and click Find Next. And make sure that it's highlighting the right X. We don't want to replace something that we don't want. And click Replace. It's going to go to the next one. See, it found an X here, but that's in the word text. So we'll just click Find Next. And right there, get Next, Replace. Right here, get Next, Replace. And now change this to Y. And change this to Get YPos. Put your cursor right here. Find Next. Replace, replace, and replace. Alright, so hit Control S and save, and hit F5 and build the program, and it should build. If you have any errors, it should just head back in the code and try and fix them, but it should run the exact same, except that instead of an X and a Y, we got our apple object. So I'm gonna pretend this is an apple, this blue thing here. Alright. That's good enough. Okay, so I think this would be a good time to take a break, and we're gonna split it into another couple of videos just so that we can actually localize all of the questions and I can answer them better if they're, I don't know, kind of split up into specific sections. So I apologize to those who already know how to do object-oriented programming and making classes and stuff. I hope it was kind of almost a good refresher for you. But for those who've never done this before, I hope you're following along. We're going to get into more exciting stuff in the next video, so stay tuned.